Hey, everybody, welcome to the show. We are here to talk about chapter 6
Woohoo!
of Ursula Le Guin's The Dispossessed. And as you just saw, I am joined, of course, by the redoubtable Dana.
Oh, the palatable day.
How are you?
I'm really good because it's Friday evening.
Yes.
Oh, and
Of,
I'm
of a
making
long weekend.
of a long weekend and the first week back with students. I have new classes and it's been um exhausting and challenging, but in a really good way. So I'm really, really happy so far. gotta, gotta keep managing these expectations.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
don't want to jinx it. So
Keep this rolling.
thank you. I actually okay, so I've gotten lots of compliments on the jacket, which I think I picked up at a secondhand store somewhere like years ago. Um, but I got new boots and they just arrived yesterday. So like the entire outfit was like planned around I get to wear my boots today. And it's Friday, and normally Fridays are dressed. You can wear jeans if you wear school colors or like a school shirt, even if it's not in school colors. But mostly because of the coronavirus, they said that just gonna do jeans January. Just jeans. So I'm wearing jeans, but I tucked them into my new boots. So it's like this, and then a pair of jeans, and I tucked them into my new brown boots, and they're really pretty. And so everybody's like, "Wow, you dressed up, and it's on a Friday." And I'm like, "Well, I am wearing jeans." I'm like, "But I mean, the boots are the thing." So I'm really happy with my new boots. So that's my today. How was your today, Steve? Or
My,
your?
t- my today was great.
I understand you watched the first however much of WandaVision.
Oh yes, well the first two episodes. That's all that
Guess what? That's
that's
what
all that they've posted
what
so far. Huh?
that's what we got.
Yeah, that's all, that's what we got. I liked it. I liked it so far.
Well,
It's
not so much for new spoilers, but I mean, you might decide to do a video about it. You don't want to like, ruin your content.
I might do a video. I probably won't, but I mean, um, but yeah, I thought it was a really it's a very it's an interesting premise. It's not quite like the usual sort of standard MCU thing, you know what I mean? Like it's so far it's not like action based.
So far.
Yeah, and um
So is
it's
it?
yeah.
I know almost. I mean, I know which characters, but like presumably it's not a sitcom either.
Actually, well, it's not really a sitcom, but it is aping the aesthetic of classic like at this point
Like,
like
like it looks
1950s and 60s sitcoms.
okay.
Um and it's yeah, it like I say it's really interesting, and I'm curious to see where it is going from here, you know, because they're doing something really um sort of building like what is really going on here, because it just starts and Scarlet Witch and Vision are just characters in this cheesy 1950s sitcom, and that like that's just the way it is. Like there's no build up, there's no setup, they're just there.
It's in
And
media res,
yes, exactly in media res.
or sometimes
But
res, but I
huh?
don't like. I've seen it in media's res as well, but I don't like that as well. It doesn't scan as nicely.
Yeah, I've always heard in media res. But but yeah, so the mystery is like what's going on, what are they, why are they there, um and you know what waiting for the other shoe to drop. And so it's and I mean the acting is terrific, obviously. I mean, Elizabeth Olsen has always been a terrific actor as far as I'm concerned. And Paul Bettany, for people who are fans of that Mitchell and Webb look, Paul Bettany in sitcom mode is pretty much indistinguishable from Robert Webb. Like he's, you know, but he's really good. And like I say, the aping of the aesthetic of those classic shows. Like the first episode was basically kind of a riff on the Dick Van Dyke Show. The second episode was more like Bewitched, and it seems like the pattern they've established in the first two episodes is every episode is going to be slightly ahead of the last one in terms of the era. You know, like so the first two were in black and white. The next one presumably will be in color.
That's
But
a
yeah,
good.
it's really cool. I'm looking forward to seeing, and the episodes are shorter. Like the first episode was 30 minutes, the second episode was 37 minutes, and that includes credits and everything. So I'm liking it so far. It's
Sweet.
yeah, it's cool. And by the way, let's not chit chat too much because
Right, because we have a
just
lot to go over.
we have this. It's a long chapter, and just as on Wednesday for Trek Reluctantly, when you had shit to do, tonight I actually have shit to do because I'm going to be a guest on Cybabe's stream at 8 my time, so we can't dawdle too
Look at
much.
you, such a big shot.
I know, such a big shot. You know,
With the
she asked me to come on the show. I said, "Oh, I guess."
with your plaque on the
So,
wall there.
yeah, you know, it carries certain responsibilities, you know.
Yeah, yeah. You have to, you know, you got to follow through, man. You got to follow through.
Yes.
Your public needs you.
I can't just sit in my house all day and do virtually nothing. That would be ridiculous.
That would be typical. I mean, ridiculous.
Thank you.
You're so welcome.
Thank you so much. So yes, Der Alte Trekkie, no, I did not watch Pennyworth. I probably never will. It just doesn't seem interesting to me. But anyway, so let's talk about chapter 6.
So before we get into
Yeah.
chapter,
Oh, please.
occurred to me, you know,
Yes.
this is actually book related. Something
Okay,
occurred to me. You
please.
said that you would not want to live on an Ars.
Oh no, I definitely would not. But why
See,
not?
I think
What?
you're wrong.
You don't think okay, you think I would want to live on an Ars?
Absolutely. Now the thing is, I think you would not be you would not arrive with one of the Odonian settlements.
Okay. Well, how would I?
Want to live on an Ars because it's the moon, Steve.
Yeah, but it's the
Get to live on the moon. You would have been one of the mining colonists who stuck around the state because you'd be living on the moon. You'd be living on the moon.
Yeah, living on the moon with a bunch of anarchists with their heads up their asses about how great their non-government government is. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, everybody on the home planet's got their heads up their asses too.
That's true. It's a lot. There's a lot of head up assery all around in this story.
Which which is what makes it so lifelike.
It's almost like reality in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, the one I will give Anaris this much: it does seem to be nicer than our moon, because our moon, I mean, ain't nobody living there at all.
I think it has naturally occurring oceans. I think their oceans are naturally occurring.
So well, I mean, yeah. The impression that we get from it in the book is that it's very, very rugged, but it's habitable. You know, and our moon ain't habitable.
Clearly,
like not without a
lot of terraforming.
Not without a terror, or you know, bringing our own air with us. You know.
Once we get to the point where we can terraform the moon, we could live there, or Mars.
Yes, we could. And I probably I
superheroes to do the work.
Exactly. Sure. So yes, I don't know. It would depend on what things were like on the moon. I mean, the idea of living on the moon is kind of cool. Sure, of course.
You know, with your NASA ball cap.
That's right, baby.
Nerd.
You know it.
I do.
So yes, chapter 6. This is another the Young Shevik Chronicles chapter, which I find I'm enjoying a lot. I really I'm liking the sort of parallel structure of the book where we get young Shevik and then present day older Shevik and how they kind of run parallel to each other and the sort of breaking up the narrative and going from one to the next chapter by chapter. Like it allows her to skip ahead in a natural way, because like, well, let's leave this and go back and learn something else about young Shevik. And then when we come back to the present, it could be right after the last time we were in the present, or it could be a few months later. It doesn't matter because we have a little break in between.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's helpful. And it's also helpful that it's a regular pattern, at least
Yeah.
so far.
So far, chapter by chapter. Yeah.
One of the book that I teach with my honors class is The Other Westmore.
Mm-hmm.
And each chapter is divided into, because it's a memoir for one person, and then also sort of biographical about someone else. So it's not, I don't know if that part is memorial. At any rate, so half the chapter is the author's memoir, and then the other half of the chapter is about the other man who has the same name as him.
Right.
But it doesn't always start out with the same person. And so you have to pay attention to the pronouns, especially since they both have the same name. So you have to pay attention to whether it's using I, me pronouns, which tells you it's the author's section, or, he, him pronouns, which tells you it's about the other guy. So this it's I appreciate how consistent she is. It makes it easy.
And this is another, it's not just the Young Shevik adventures, or the Young Shevik Chronicles, but this chapter specific
Chronicles. That's like the animated series version.
The Saturday morning cartoon version of the absolutely. And it's specifically it's sort of interested in Shevik attempting to escape his isolation. Because he's sort of he's getting out of the hospital, or he's gotten out of the hospital at the beginning of the chapter after his illness, and he has sort of decided, and he gets visited by a neighbor who kind of hangs out with him, and he decides that he doesn't want it. He wants to be more active in the community, and he wants to make friends and be around people more. He doesn't want to isolate himself as much as he has been, and the chapter is sort of taken up with his various efforts in trying to do that. And the way and in some ways it seems like he finds it kind of fulfilling, and in other ways he sort of just has to grit his teeth and force himself to do it a lot of the times, because he doesn't enjoy it a lot, or he doesn't enjoy a lot of the people that he ends up hanging out with. But anyway, he
doesn't get along with everybody, which is like, normal.
Yeah.
It is what it is. We're in Shevik's perspective, and one thing that I circled pretty early on, it says at the bottom of my first page of the chapter, it was hard to see why the Tsar did this. And so I circled and said, do we find out? Because of course Shevik doesn't know, and he's our perspective character, so we don't know. I don't know if we ever figured out why the Tsar did this, but he did, and that's part of Shevik's like, people, we're social creatures, and I'm part of a society, so I guess I should, try to not just be all by myself.
Yeah. Well, that's sort of been Shevik's main conflict, like his internal conflict for the book so far, is that he feels a responsibility, having been raised in this society and having been taught that, the community is very important, everybody has to do their part, and we're all in this together. So he feels a sort of an intellectual, a moral responsibility to do that, but he also has a personal impulse that he doesn't want to do that he doesn't feel like he fits in, and a lot of times he would rather just be left alone, but he feels like he has to push against that.
His impulse has always been work related.
Yeah.
His impulse has been to do things that contribute to the community. He's never really felt, there's never really the sense that he is taught to be a part, to make connections with others, to be part of a community. You know what I mean? Yeah. It talks about down at the bottom of the next page, which is just such a nice way of putting it. We've switched kind of from Shevik's perspective to a more authorial perspective. Shevik at 21 was not a prig exactly.
Oh, I like this part.
His morality was passionate and drastic, but it was still fitted to a rigid mold. The simplistic Odonianism taught children by mediocre adults and internalized preaching. But it's interesting that what he's picked up on is that he must do things that are valuable to the community, not he must make connections and find others with whom he can connect. He ain't gonna be able to be you're not going to click with everybody. That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
But there doesn't seem to have been, or at least, he doesn't remember, and we aren't exposed to any sort of beyond, Sadic, don't egoize, the lecturing, don't think only of yourself. But that's not the same as, well, what do other people think? Who are you going to spend time with and things like that. It's not the same focus.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also that I like that the passage you just quoted from, 'cause not only is it's just, again, as we found throughout the book so far, it's just a very well written, well phrased bit of writing, but also that's another conflict that is dealt with repeatedly in this chapter, which is related to Shevik's personal conflict, but is also external to it, which is the difference between the sort of idealized dogmatic version of the anarchism that these people are trying to live out and the demands of reality, and good ways and bad ways, and we'll get into more detail a little bit later on in the chapter, but that's another sort of complication that is discussed a lot in this chapter. So,
bye, dear Alter Trekkie. Be
oh,
well.
bye, Alter Trekkie.
One of the things that I noted was that it says everything that the things that they were taught were very practical. It says pragmatic.
Yes.
No distinction was drawn between the arts and the crafts. Art was not considered as having a place in life, but as being a basic technique of life, like speech. Art is just something that people do, create. And then it's interesting. It goes on to say that as far as the arts of words, poetry, and storytelling tended to be ephemeral, to be linked with song and dancing. Only the theater stood wholly alone, and only the theater was ever called the art. So it sounds like there's not recorded fiction.
Yeah, at least not much. Because that maybe that would be impractical. That would be considered, too much of an extravagance.
I mean, not according to. It's a basic technique of life, and especially one of a note I questioned was, do honoresty children not play pretend or tell stories? I mean, and that's one of the things I think that I would love to see research into storytelling as a human instinct.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
And the preservation of story as well. Whether it's through like oral tradition or writing it down,
Yeah.
Or some random geek, they don't work that much. I mean,
that's true.
It needs to be done, but they talk about the fact that they have a lot of leisure time compared to what we think of as like a full-time job being a 40-hour week. They don't work as much as we do.
They do have a lot of free time. Yeah.
So the challenges that they face are to some degree, I don't want to say self-imposed, but accepted.
Mm-hmm.
Like if they were willing to work more hours, they could conceivably produce more, items, more stuff. But for them, it's more important to maintain their society and their values and things like that. So it's hard to say.
Well, I also wanted to know, I found it interesting, and I thought, you might have some thoughts on this as well, because you have actually done live theater. I found it just fascinating that poetry and written forms of art are described as ephemeral, and theater is described as something else. When theater, at least, I mean, the performance arts that aren't recorded, that are just performed for that audience on that night, that's one of the most ephemeral forms of art there is, because that performance exists in that moment and then it's gone. Like, what could be more ephemeral? But for whatever reason, in this culture, in this world, theater is not like,
No, that's not what it means. That's not what the text means. That's not what she's talking about.
you don't think?
No. Poetry and storytelling tended to be ephemeral, to
Right.
be with song and dancing. So they're not recorded. That's
So they're
why they're
not. Oh, I see what you're. So the it would be like recited poetry.
It's like, yeah, it's like, open mic night, but it's all extemporaneous.
I got you. Okay.
That I think that's what she's getting at. So
And I guess, well, in that context, it makes sense because presumably, if troops of actors are performing in theater, they're, some part of it is written down, and playwrights are referenced in this section. So maybe like, plays and theatrical performances are the only things that they do write down.
In the list, it says they perform tragedies, semi-improvised comedies, mimes. So the fact that the comedies are semi-improvised implies that there is a basic structure that they work with, and then some of the dialogue they riff on that. But it doesn't say that the tragedies are improvised at all. So it would seem that
they're scripted.
The tragedies have been scripted, and they've been memorized.
Yeah.
Mimes, I think, are more likely, again, like the comedies, they have a structure and then they just interact with each other. I would guess that the mimes are fully improvisational.
Improvisational based on very rigidly established techniques. I mean, if it's like if it's like our mimes.
Yes, like there are things, there are certain gestures mean certain things.
Certain bits.
I also talk with that when we look at symbolism in my class. I show ballets because I said, they're telling a story and there's no words. So how do we figure this out? How do we analyze this? And so we talk about the choreography, the staging, the lighting, the music, all sorts of things. How can we tell what's going on? So the first one I started out is a couple of clips from Cinderella, and they do a really good job of figuring out that it is Cinderella. And I have to stop it before the end, because the end just says starts credits and it's like Cinderella, da, da, da. And then so they're familiar with the story, and that helps them figure it out. And then we go to Swan Lake, and I just show them like the ending. And in the ending, there are some elements of ballet pantomime, like gestures that have specific meaning. And so I talk about that, and the fact that you can kind of guess at what's going on even without that. Like there's the elements of the staging and the music and things like that, the tempo of the music, the pitch, whether it's in a major or minor key, all of those things contribute to it. But the pantomime, this means something specific. It's like there are words, even though there aren't. So it's really interesting the way that it blends all of that together. It also made me think of the whole the intricacies of the Commedia dell'arte and the very strict characters that they have. Like this character does this thing. So yeah, it's a lot of that. One of the things when it talks about Shevek was not real big on the drama. It says that it was I like the word uncongenial to him. I'm like, okay, why? I was very curious about that. What did you think?
Yeah. Do you think it's? I mean, he's an interesting character to try to wrap your head around, because as a scientist or a mathematician or a theorist, he seems like he has a great deal of imagination and a great deal of insight and a great deal, a lot of creativity to be able to sort of see things other people can't see and reach conclusions other people maybe wouldn't think to.
Yes, but it is based in reality.
Yeah, he doesn't. Yeah, he doesn't have a lot of fancy about him.
Yeah,
and I think maybe that's it. Because it says the whole idea of acting was uncongenial to him. It's like, there's something about, why would I want to pretend to be someone else? Why would I want to say words that aren't my words? Why would I want to, maybe that's it. He just doesn't connect. And the other thing is, we've seen, and it's the main sort of subject of this whole chapter. He struggles to connect with people. And if you can't connect with other people and you can't put yourself in their shoes, it's probably going to be difficult, definitely, to be an actor yourself, and also to appreciate the art of acting, because that's what it is.
and to appreciate the art of storytelling.
Yeah.
Fiction. There is a decent amount of research that looks at the relationship between narrative and empathy, and there's a connection there. Usually, most of what I'm familiar with is that when the more that people are exposed to stories, especially about stories that about people who are different from them, who they don't see as like them,
Yeah.
it increases their empathetic awareness and their compassion. And so it's really interesting, and I'd love to do, to see more of that. And I'd also be interested in, as we're seeing with Shevik, if the converse is true. If people who are more connected to others, who are more empathetic, who have lots of people in their lives, who are not necessarily extroverted, but people who are socially connected, who feel comfortable around others, if they are more interested in storytelling, just fiction in general, not even specifically about fiction between people, but just in imaginative fiction, if they're more interested in that, if they express more interest and will watch a story longer, will read a story longer and say, I've read, till this page and then I stopped,
Yeah.
what does it work the other way as well? So it's really curious. And then we get to sex.
Yes. And well, for the first time, because it comes up again and later in the chapter. But yeah, we learned that he tries to be sexually active. He has sex with some girls. But he doesn't really enjoy it. He says
You
that
give it the old college try.
yeah, and he says that he feels like there should be pleasure in it, but there's just not. So eventually he just loses interest.
Yeah. I love the use of the word. The phrase, it was not the joy it ought to be. I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, just way to make it like an obligation there. Jeez, dude. And then Le Guin also says afterwards he feels ashamed because it involved another person as object. And I'm like, that's only if like you're framing it that way, I mean,
well, but obviously he is.
yeah.
I mean,
he is unable to, the idea that he's unable to understand another person as like, he can't appreciate that they're a person, that seemed out of character for him, because he isn't a jerk. He is aware that these are people.
yeah, but he also has a tendency to kind of get in his own head.
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah, and there's that constant sort of tug of war between his ideals and his feelings or his instincts or his impulses, and maybe he feels like, well, because he's not getting pleasure out of it, because it's not an enjoyable experience that he is sharing with another person as it's supposed to be, according to him, then there's something wrong about it. Then he's like, because it's also referred to as, because he doesn't find joy in it, he sees it as just sort of functional. It's referred to as just the relief of need. And so maybe he feels, because of that, he feels as though he's just using the other person to get something he needs, as opposed to having a shared experience.
Yeah. Emerlian asks, he's not a jerk, but isn't he a bit neurodivergent? He shows some traits that seem neurodivergent, but it's difficult to say how much of that is from actual neurodivergence. We do know that he seems to be one of the brightest minds that Anaris has seen in generations, specifically in terms of his field. But some of his social neurodivergence may be related to the expectations that are placed on him as a result, and the expectations that he places on himself as a result. He doesn't develop social skills because he doesn't practice them, because he's focused on his physics. I mean, you only got so much time. You only got so much, attention. What you choose to focus your attention on shapes who you are. And so those experiences have shaped him as well. So how much of the, the apparent neurodivergence is due to like biological function or innate biological function, let's say, and how much of it is due to the way his experiences have shaped him, it's difficult to say. I don't think we're really told that. And again, this is like written in the early 70s. So there's a lot that we know more now than we did then, even though we still have a lot more to learn. I moved on to my next note is where he's talking about the theory of simultaneity, and which last year he had thought was almost in his grasp. I underlined that, and in the margin I wrote, ha 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 ha.
Yeah. You
like,
thought
that's the way science worked. It's like I almost got this, and it's like when you think that you almost got something, it works out that way.
Well, not just science, but I mean creative endeavors as well.
Yeah, exactly.
You might think like I'm going to finish. Yeah. Like, I thought I had it all figured out. I thought for sure I'd be done with this by now, and you're not.
No, that's just be aware when you start having that feeling. Just like take a moment, take a step back. Be ready. It's a warning. Take that sucker as a warning.
Yeah, don't get too cocky, kid.
And then he's not getting along well. Gvarb is getting older.
Yeah.
And he's having difficulty spending time with her. And I'm not sure if we're in Shevik's perspective or if we're in more omniscient narrator perspective, because it says, either he had to let her bore him for hours or he had to hurt and confuse her by trying to set her straight. It was beyond the patience or tact of anyone his age. And I'm like, no, that ain't true. That is so
like maybe that's an excuse he's making.
Yeah, exactly.
For himself.
There are kids who got to put up with that. There are children who deal with, older relatives, and, you have to be nice to so-and-so because, being kind to people is what we do. It's part of being in our society, and everyone has value and every life has value. I'm just like, I don't really buy that, dude. Yeah, he's making excuses there. He's 21.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a teaching position yet because they won't give him one.
Right.
Because they don't want a quarrel with Sabul. And I underlined that and I wrote, someone needs to do it. And see, this is again, his social, I wouldn't say social IQ, I would say social skill. Again, I want to emphasize that this is something that he has not practiced. He has chosen to prioritize other things. And we're seeing the consequences of that decision. Yeah. And part of the challenge of this sort of society without a defined hierarchy is that you have to convince other people. Like if you want to do something that you can't do just by yourself, that's part of the way mutual aid works, is like you have to convince other people to go in on it with you. And he can't do that because he doesn't have the social skill to do so. Yeah. He can't convince these other people to go against Sabul.
Yeah.
He can't convince Sabul to have them give him a class or to publish his work under his name. He has missed out because he didn't develop his social abilities.
Yeah. And also it's not just the not being offered a teaching position. It's also he wants to communicate with Urus.
Yes, that's what next.
Yeah, and they won't let him, or they won't allow him to. And he goes, he tries to go through Sabul, and Sabul is like, nope. And then he tries to go around Sabul to the Physics Federation and ask them, can you help me communicate with, can I put letters on the ships that are traveling back and forth? And they say no, not out of deference to Sabul, but because they just don't think it's important, which reminds us.
Yeah, goes right back to what I was saying. And I put a chart because he says, they say, he's like, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just new. And they say, if it's new, share it with us, not with, our enemies.
Right.
And because I've tried to offer a course every quarter for a year now. You always say there isn't enough demand for it. And I put a note and said, how much demand is enough? And I mean, especially if he's offering something that's new, he has the opportunity to talk it up to build demand. He can't do that because he
Yeah.
doesn't have
He doesn't have that skill. Yeah.
he doesn't even know he needs to do it.
No.
But I put a star and down on it in all caps. You must convince others of why, with like the Y spelled out with 3 Y's, of why it matters. And his are you afraid of it because it's new? I'm like, dude, you're not helping your case by
Yeah.
like putting people on the defensive and by yelling. It doesn't. We don't have exclamation points there.
No.
But he comes across as being not just aggressive, but pushy.
Yeah. Well, because it's a part of his personality, because he's obviously passionate about this work, and he's obviously it's important to him, but he's not able to articulate to others why it's important to him, because it seems like he's so bulldog focused on it. He wants to do it just to do it.
And there's
Like,
some that's another piece of evidence for possible neurodivergence. So, without naming names, of students, my husband worked with a young man who is on the autism spectrum. He worked with them for many years, but his family had a story. This is from before we knew him, of when he was in kindergarten. And he knew his colors, but the other kindergartners were being taught their colors. And like, for him, it was like, I know things, that means people know these things.
right.
Like, this is the way it is. I see it this way. This is reality. And he picked up a crayon and said, this is yellow, YELLOW. Can't you get that? He was not happy about this.
Well, yeah, I know this. Why don't you know this?
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's, it's not necessarily, it's not necessarily the case, because, some of that development happens to all people. Theory of mind is something that develops around 3 or 4 for, into the early elementary grades. And it's just really interesting to look at, because really little kids, it's what makes talking with the really little kids so much fun, because they can't lie. They can't lie, because they, like, whatever is in their heads is that's reality.
Right.
So, and then they get to the point where they start to realize that you don't know everything. And so they can tell you something and you might accept it. Like, that comes with experience, but they don't yet realize the evidence. That's when it's like, are you sure you didn't eat the Oreos? I did. Oh, honey child. So, they have the doll test, in which, that they ask kids about, they have 2 dolls, Jill and Sally, and they have Jill and Sally in the room with the child, and they put some M&Ms from the table in Jill's pocket. And then the kid goes out of the room, or the kid is asked, where does Sally think the M&Ms are? Well, Sally thinks they're in Jill's pocket. And then, or they're in a cup and put them in Jill's pocket. And then they take Sally out of the room and they put the M&Ms in Jill's pocket with the kid there. And then they bring Sally back into the room and they ask the kid, where does Sally think the M&Ms are? And when they're young enough, the kids will say, in Sally's pocket, or in Jill's pocket, because that's where they are. And the kid knows this, therefore Sally knows this. But at about 4-ish, kids will start saying, Sally thinks that the M&Ms are in the cup.
Right.
But they're really in Jill's pocket. And it's like, the way that this was described when I first read about it was just, the kids are like, they're in on this secret. And they're just so delighted. They've started figuring this out, and it's absolutely adorable. But yeah, it's Charles Chapman. We haven't gotten. Did we? What Bait Up was last chapter, right?
Yeah, but he comes back. He hasn't come back yet, but he comes back.
And I think we have to think about where we're getting the information from. That's Bedap's perspective. And I think also, yes, there is to some degree social blockage. But, you know, by this point, they have traditions and they know what works. And so they're tentative about doing something differently, which is, I think that's understandable. But again, it comes back to, if we have something that works, you need to convince us that what you're proposing is better than what we have. And you ain't doing that.
Right.
He doesn't.
And I mean, it's sort of, it's two strikes against him, because there's his own limitations in terms of communication and connecting with other people, and being able or willing to explain these ideas in a way that would be compelling to others, and would communicate why they're important or why they should support them. And then there's also the fact that just his work is very obscure to most other people, because he is so far advanced.
Yeah.
Like, most other people on Anaris just don't get it, period. And so even if he
was capable of,
yeah,
you know, of explaining what he's attempting to accomplish.
Yeah.
You know, and he gets a bit overwrought, I think. Nothing he did was understood. To put it more honestly, nothing he did was meaningful. And I questioned that. I said, does meaning and purpose require community? And I think that's where he's going with that.
Yeah.
It's not, it doesn't connect with others. And then it goes on, he says, you know, he had burnt out at 20. He would achieve nothing further. Oh, woe is he. You know, it's you know, it's kind of like Harry Potter in books 5 and 6. You know, he's except he's older. And so there's less.
I've peaked. I've peaked. That's it.
It's one of my favorite parts of Third Rock from the Sun, when she finds out that as a woman she is beautiful and therefore she is, you know, at the top of the heap. And then she's like, wait, what's this? A wrinkle. I've peaked. My life is over. Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah. How did this happen at 21? Because he really, really sounds like he's 15 or 16 right there. I'm just saying. And yeah, Bedap shows up and is like, you know, there is no need for orange.
Yeah. He gives him shit about the not just the blanket, but the fact that it's orange. He says you should dye it another color. You should dye it green if you want to keep that blanket.
And I'm just like,
I love Bedap.
He goes on to say orange serves no vital function in the social organism at either the cellular or organic level. I'm like, didn't you say you're a functions analyst?
What does that even mean?
I didn't. Not a biologist. I mean, like, I feel like I want him to say that in front of like Talker.
Yeah, really.
What? No, you're just wrong. Okay, he's just wrong about that, and certainly not at the hollow orgasmic or most centrally ethical level. What?
What are you talking about? I love Bedap though. He's he is full of shit in many ways, but
and, I mean, does he not know that there are more organisms than what they have on Anaris?
Right, like that? A lot more.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm like, whatever. So, and my note for that says, talk to Bedap about what Bedap knows and you don't. Like, he's really frustrated because he's not making progress on this. And so, you know, so why are you telling him about this? Ask him about his work as a functions analyst. I'm like, it's just like basic levels of social connection. It's just another, I don't know. Grumble. Yeah, the orange bit was funny. He's like, there's no purpose to orange. And it's like, well, I mean, you're just wrong. So, yeah.
Yeah. And then they get to talking about power structures.
Yes, the wall. You come up against the wall. Shevit turned with a frightened look. I'm like, frightened? I guess the idea of a wall. But the thing is, here's what I added in the margins, you know, because the idea of a wall suddenly frightens him. But I'm like, dude, you lived in buildings.
Right.
They have
With
walls.
walls.
What the heck? Walls aren't up. My note says walls aren't always bad. They can protect, like from wind and rain. And that's you know, when you know, I've butted heads with my conservative acquaintances about the wall, like Trump's
Yeah.
wall.
The wall. Yeah.
And they're like, well, I guess, you know, that, you know, you're okay with just not having any doors or walls in your house. I'm like, well, it rains. Like, you know, and if somebody, you know, yeah, people can come in. It's okay. You can just, like, I don't know. And part of it is, again, we're not wealthy. I mean, I think the most expensive thing that we have is our refrigerator.
Mm.
And if somebody breaks in and successfully steals our refrigerator, more power to them.
Good.
Dude.
Yeah. Good job.
I'm impressed. Okay, I'm impressed. I'll be a little bit, you know, it's unfortunate. We'll need a new fridge, and you know, it'll be inconvenient. But yeah, and actually, you know, no, I would say, you know, I guess the house itself is the most expensive thing we own, but or the heat and air unit, and that's outside. You know, I just, yeah, walls are not inherently bad. It's how they're used. So, but the idea that as soon as BitApp says the wall, Shevin's like, oh no, that
Yeah.
was,
Well,
I found that amusing. I don't think it was a,
and again, it's that conflict between what is the way it's supposed to be, or the way we tell ourselves it is, and the way it actually is. Because BDAP is saying, okay, maybe there's not an organized power structure, but there's totally like a social power structure
oh
in
yeah,
our society, and that's, you know, that's just the way it is. And BDAP isn't happy about it. I think he says that it's sort of it's like a betrayal of the Odonian principles, but he's kind of cynical about it. He's like, well, this is what we've come back to. You know, this is this is the kind of people we are. We can't hold to these high ideals. The way we live is not this way. You know, we create these hierarchies in our lives, even though we don't formalize them.
yeah, I know,
They're
but they
still
all
there.
follow photo anyway. You know, there's, you know, it's like we talk about on like some of the askaways and things like that. You know, in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the idea of a justifiable or reasonable or willing hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the idea that you defer to someone else's expertise, or that you sometimes put aside your own preferences. We talk about this. I talk about this with my students. You know, when do you assert your own desires, and when do you, you know, individuality versus community? In fact, that was probably the first issue video that I did, and it's that we talk about regularly in class, because especially at 15 years old, they're testing those boundaries of when do I push for what I want, and when do I accept what my family wants, when do I accept their expectations of me. One of the students that I was worried about, you know, over the semester break, some of what he was going through was probably boundary testing. You know, how do I navigate what I want versus what my family wants for me? So it's just, you know, Summer Energy points out, if I'm sick, I will trust my doctor.
Right.
You know, in my case, I'm not always necessarily good about that. I will ask my doctor why he thinks what he thinks. When I moved down here and got a new oncologist, we butted heads for a while, because I wanted to know why. I wanted references, you know, I was like, you know, is there some reading material that you can give me? You know, I want to understand, you know, what the different treatments you're offering are, And I can see the tension radiating from him. And I, you know, once we sort of understood how to communicate with each other, that made it a lot smoother. And yeah, you know, BitApp goes on about Sabol, public opinion. That's the power structure he's part of and knows how to use. Here's the thing. You could use it too. You just don't know how. And then he goes on to say, you know, the unadmitted inadmissible government that rules the Odonian society by stifling the individual mind. And I said, stifling? You could just as easily say challenging. Just because they push back against you, that's a challenge. Is this idea worth pursuing? Convince me.
Right.
Convince us. And if you can't convince us, then maybe it's not. Maybe, you know, who needs to give? So, oh, I've got lots on the next page.
Go for it.
It's already 10 after 10 to 7. Okay. Oh yeah. When they're talking about this concept being diseased, and he says, you know, people seeing their talent, their work, their lives wasted. And I'm just like, first of all, according to whom? I think, and again, they're in their early 20s. You know, there is, you know, you go through cycles in your life of questioning, is what does what I'm doing matter? And to what extent? To whom does this matter? Does it matter to me? And if so, why? I think that's important. You know, by whose estimation, I said, who counts the most? Like, does my own opinion of my life, if I don't feel like I'm making a difference, is that more important than other people saying, yeah, you've made a difference? But if I don't feel like it, you know, if I don't feel that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So who counts for that? Oh, and then he goes on to say, but nothing changes anymore. I'm like, yeah, that's not true. That's just flat out not true. No, you're just wrong, dude. Again, like with the orange, okay? And,
well, but I think what he's getting at is because a little bit later because Shevik says, well, you know, it's not that society, it's not society, it's the fact that Anarish is such a rough place. You know, we have limited resources. And so therefore, like the best thing that we can do is to find solidarity with each other. And Badap turns that around and says, well, but in our solidarity, we've become obedient instead of cooperative, you know. And because he points out that, you know, like we didn't invent solidarity. They have solidarity on Earth too.
Yeah.
But here, he says here the social conscience isn't a living thing anymore. It's a machine controlled by the bureaucrats. So again, he's coming back to this point of, you know, it's not
what he thinks. He doesn't really offer any evidence.
No.
Well, logical support, none of it. This is what he thinks. And the note that I made is other people might not want what you want. They may not value what you value. That is the price of freedom.
Yeah, and
that's part of what it means to be an Odonian. You know, and yeah, I underlined that line. We've let cooperation become obedience.
Yeah,
we've let it, and so you know that's where he's going with this. Is we need to look for ways to, you know, like I was saying about, you know, these 15-year-olds to test those boundaries. What happens when we do this? And they start talking about that as well. People discriminated, and this was, I think we're starting to get towards education. I have a lot to say on that, you know. People discriminated very carefully between administering things and governing people. They did it so well that we forgot that the will to dominance is as central in human beings as the impulse to mutual aid. And I said, because I'm thinking back that they were very careful about Abene. It became central as a result of functionality, but they were very, very, you know, we don't want this to become a government. We don't want this to be our capital. Right. So I put, you know, they did this discrimination so well that we forgot about this natural human impulse. And I'm like, then why wasn't the reminder that the will to dominance is part of human nature? Why isn't that part of their education? Because that ought to be. That needs to be. And I'm just like, why don't they teach empathy Oh, and here's my note. Cite research about narrative and empathy. So we already got
Yeah,
to that.
we got that. Yeah.
Why we don't educate for freedom? Why not? Who decides? Who benefits? Education, the most important activity of the social organism, maybe, and it also depends on how you define education, has become rigid, moralistic, and authoritarian. And again, my question in the margin: why? Why has it become that way? And kids learn to parrot Odo's words as if they were laws. And the note that I made was, like their scripture. She is venerated. Yeah. But of course, for them, laws are even, it also carries that negative connotation.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And then I don't know if I'm looking ahead to my notes on the next page.
Go for it. Yeah, go for it.
So he's protesting. He's kind of pushing back against this. He says, he says nobody could gain power in a system like this. You get a year of training, then 4 years of working as an organizer, and then you're out. Nobody could gain power in the archist sense in a system like that with only 4 years to do it in. And he says some people stay on longer than 4 years. He says, yeah, but they're just advisors and they don't vote. And he says votes aren't important. There are people behind the scenes. And he's like, you're paranoid. What are you talking about? Anybody can go to any meeting and debate and vote. Are you trying to pretend that we have politicians here? Shevik was furious with Badap. And I circled that with Badap and I wrote, no, he wasn't. He's mad at himself for not noticing this.
Right.
And thinking of it himself.
Right. Well, yeah, because, I mean, again, Shevik is sort of arguing the side of the way things are supposed to be.
Yeah.
Like, and that's what he keeps answering Badap with. He keeps telling him, no, what you're saying wouldn't happen because of the way things have been organized. And Badap is trying to tell him, look, this is the way things actually are.
As he sees it.
He's not necessarily
Badap's friends. And when we get to that, the composer, I wrote some notes on the composer as well, because let me tell you, he's also not completely wrong, but there are alternatives that he has apparently not considered. And then Desar, the one who helped him out when he got back from the hospital, he's like, can you knocked on the wall for crying?
Yeah, because they've been arguing. Yeah, they've been arguing in Shevik's room all night.
Like the neighbors in Zootopia. Can't just see they've had a bad day. Except I guess Shevik and Badap are the giraffes.
Yes.
Argumentative giraffes. And then this was hilarious. And Shevik accuses him, if your ideas won't stand public examination, I don't want them as midnight whispers. And I said, that's the problem. They weren't whispers. Y'all need to calm down and talk about them.
They were screaming at each other.
So that was funny. And then they start talking about Tyrion.
Yes. Who, depending on how you look at it, was either forced to go to an asylum or chose completely of his free will to go to an asylum. And again, it's that just because you technically aren't forced to go doesn't mean that there can't be a little bit of sort of social coercion, which is Badap's point. He says that
more than a little bit.
More than a little bit, yeah, because he says Tyrion wrote a play that was not very popular. And people didn't like it. So he was publicly reprimanded, which basically it means you just get yelled at in front of everybody. Everybody kind of lines up and tells you what a prick you are, and why they don't like what you did or whatever. And it kind of affected him. And eventually he went off to Segvina Island, which is
jumping ahead of some of my notes. So yeah, we'll get to that. Because he started getting bitter.
Yeah.
And so he became qualified as a mathematics instructor and asked for a job, but he got a physical labor job instead. The computer said, here's your posting. He's like, well, I don't want to do that. Oh my gosh, I have an upside down kitty offering his belly. I'm sorry, I promise I will come pet your belly later. Oh, he's so cute. It's so tempting. He protested it as an error, but the DivLab computers repeated it. And I'm like, you need to investigate that because, the computers did it. So that makes me wonder, who watches the watchers? Who's programming and maintaining the computers? How did the computers get this information? And Shevik says, yeah, but, he'd always had an inside job. Maybe it was his turn to work outside. But App just doesn't, it says, paid no attention. He's like, you're just wrong. You're not seeing it. He wrote apparently to Badap that he was quitting his posting. He got multiple situations like this, always somewhere far away and, always somewhere little outpost communities where there's not a lot of people.
Yeah.
So small towns, physical labor. And he wrote that he was quitting his job and coming back to there and to see him. He didn't come. And maybe at that point, Badap doesn't really know what's going on. And he only investigated later. But if I have a friend who says that they're coming to visit me and then they don't show, I want to know why.
Right. What happened? Yeah.
Yeah. And so anyway, then he stopped writing. I traced him through the Abney labor files. Finally, they sent me a copy of his card, and the last entry was therapy, Sigbina Island. What do you get sent to the asylum for besides that? And that's where you said, yeah, Shevik says, you have to request to go to the asylum. And it's interesting. So like it's an island, and this is sort of their version of jail.
Right.
You are separated, but
you're away from the rest of society. Yeah.
This is remember when you were saying that, sometimes if somebody doesn't behave, folks will beat them up.
Right.
So that's why it is asylum. If you think that, people don't like you and they're going to beat you up, you can request.
You can go to the island.
You can go to jail instead. And they have therapists there. It's supposed to be a healing place. So down at the bottom of the page, I'm like, how do you get out? I'm like, I want to know more about Sigbina Island. I really, really want to know. I mean, you need to go visit there. You can't just, if there is a place where the bad people go, I would want to know what it was. Why do people go there? Who goes there? I would really want to know.
Right.
Yeah. Summeran says it theoretically it's restorative justice, but App doesn't seem to think so.
No. Oh, again, because he's, after Shevik says, well, you have to request to be posted there, but that contradicts that. And he says, no. And he's talking about nobody legally forced him to go. Like that kind of mechanism doesn't exist in this society. Nobody can compel you to go, but
know that he's not wanted. And that's one of the things that I talked about. That, teachers in places where teachers have actual unions and have public school teachers do not have tenure the way that university professors do.
Yeah.
But when you have tenure, even if your job is completely protected, unless you freaking break the law, they can still let you know that they don't want you.
Yeah.
They can make you know that you're not valued, that you need to retire. You need to move on.
You need to go somewhere else. Yeah. You'll be happier somewhere else.
And we'll be happier too.
Yeah.
We don't want to. I mean, without ever saying anything directly, nothing actionable, of course.
Right.
And the same thing happens even in K-12 education.
Mm-hmm.
Even in places where you could be fired, it's easier just to make you or to convince you to quit, because then they ain't gotta, they don't have to prove that you weren't doing a good job. They can just be like, oh, well, that person just quit.
Yeah.
It's easier for them, instead of having to have just cause,
Yeah. Okay. So let's move ahead a little bit, because so Shevik and Badap spends the night in Shevik's room, and then they start Huh?
I liked that it wasn't
Yeah.
so. One of them cried out. The other one reached his arm out, sleepily muttering reassurance. I like that it wasn't specified
Yeah.
who was. I really liked
I
that.
like that too. And they start spending more time together. Um, and it's said that Shevik, even though he doesn't get along with Badap, but he spends time with him and they become like really close because Shevik, he seems to feel like the challenge of hanging out with Badap so much and arguing with him, like that's good for him, you know.
You get the part that they're having sex, dude.
Yeah, no, they're well, no, I was going to get that. They're and that's interesting too because Shevik is established like in the text as hetero, but it said that he reaches out to Badap sexually. And because like he, he he has enough sort of affection for him and enough sort of love for him that he feels like he's willing to do that, you know. And I think it's even sort of suggested that Shevik kind of initiates it, isn't it? Um, and it's
Yeah,
a bit, yeah,
I mean, because Badap knows that Shevik is straight,
yeah,
so it would be, I don't know, weird for him to do it. But if
yeah,
Shevik initiates it, then that makes it okay.
yeah, yeah. And then through Badap, he sort of becomes acquainted with a larger social circle because
A lot
Badap does have a
anarchists.
yeah, because Badap has a lot of friends, and so this is where he meets, and this is where if you want to talk about the composer, he meets
Yeah.
Salas, who is the composer.
Yes. So there's so much going on because he composes music, and apparently
And his music is not well liked.
his music is not well, but like, music isn't useful, but like the musicians need compositions. And so they have the freedom to either play something or not play something. I mean, music, especially, like orchestral music, as this is implied to be,
Mm-hmm.
is, it's very much a group effort. So, I mean, why doesn't he just take it to the musicians?
I don't know.
Like, he doesn't, the musicians could either agree or refuse to play it. And the thing is, they don't have nobody's got an obligation to play your music. If you're learn an instrument, dude, play your own music. And then,
Well, and he does play an instrument.
They don't owe you their labor. That's like so nuts. That's so capitalist.
Well, but this is
It really is.
but this is a way that Salas and Shevik relate to each other because Salas feels unappreciated for his music, and Shevik feels unappreciated for his work in math and science because because they're both out of step.
Yeah, Charles Chapman asks, "Is Shevik's consent to a relationship that he isn't to sexual behavior that he isn't sexually interested in, but that shows a desire for evidence of good social intelligence or poor social intelligence." In that case, he's, I would say, good. I would say that is a social skill. He is doing this as a way to strengthen his bond with Badap. Yeah. And I think he reads that situation accurately because what we see in the text is that Badap then, sort of brings him into his circle of friends.
Yeah.
So apparently it worked. So he read the situation accurately. Even though they don't keep having sex. It's a thing for a little while and then
they kind of stop. Yeah.
It's kind of like, they kiss and make up, because they've had an argument and then, it's, it just sort of, they resolve it more physically.
Yeah.
So he's still kind of thinking about it. I've gone past the bit with the music.
Mm-hmm.
I underlined he could not rebel against his society because his society, properly conceived, was a revolution, a permanent one, ongoing process. So by by pushing for change, you are being Odonian. But at the same time, keep in mind, society means, I mean, by definition, is interaction with others. A person doing what they want on their own without regard for others, that's not society. That's literally antisocial.
Right.
And that's not what it is. So, you know, that yes, society, you know, they do push for change, but how they push for change, and I think this is what one of the ways that the book encourages us to examine our own choices, how they push for change is important.
Yeah. Well, and Shevik argues that, because it says in the section that you just quoted from, Badap directly criticizes their society.
Mm-hmm.
And for, you know, for obviously from his own perspective, but he points out things that he thinks are wrong or inconsistent or not in keeping with their professed values, and Shevik doesn't see as much value in that. To Shevik, the way, if you think that society needs to be changed or needs to be improved, you do what you can do and act, and at the end of that paragraph, you act from the center of your soul.
Yeah.
You live authentically as yourself without worrying about, it says, without fear of punishment and without hope of reward, you know. And you just it's sort of like the libertarian ideal of, well, if everybody just did what they were supposed to do, everything would turn out fine. That's
And
sort
he's
of
21.
hmm?
And he's 21.
Yeah, and he's yeah. They're very, yeah. We have to keep that in mind. They're all very young still,
Which is
but that's
hilarious because you know, if any of my students ever see this, they'll be like, "He's 21. He's a total grown up."
he's got it all figured out.
Not necessarily. Obviously not.
He would almost be finished college.
To him as young. We're old, Steve.
We are.
We're middle aged.
We are. Well, we're early pre-middle age is what I like to say. Okay. Pre-middle age.
No, like literally middle age, dude.
No, you're not 45 yet. 45 is middle age.
No.
Yes, damn it, Dana.
Middle. I mean, average lifespan for white folks in America, we're in the middle.
All right, fine. All right.
And me being older than you puts me at my middle and you at your middle.
All right, fine. We're middle-aged. Are you happy now?
I've been quite happy. I've got a long weekend coming up. Woohoo! And minimal grading to do.
Yay!
Oh, and I brought colored pens home to grade with. Each assignment gets a different color. So I have pink and green and teal and purple and red and navy blue. Oh, I'm not actually looking forward to it, but I am looking forward to using the pens.
Well, at least there's that. Okay, so
and then some description. I need to take this to school. I meant to take it for Thursday when I had when I pulled in on using sensory detail does not just apply to the classic 5 senses. It's about getting the sense of a situation. It's really what I'm going. These are honor students. So I want to push past the sight, sound, taste, touch, smell, blah, blah, blah. But when he looks at Tokfer and he says, in her eye, or Le Guin writes, in her eyes there was a darkness, not the opacity of bright dark eyes, but a quality of depth, almost like deep black fine ash, very soft. Like, no, like that's not literal description. It's not, specific 5 senses sensory detail, but it gives you the sense of what it brings you into his experience. It
allows you to visualize it. Yeah.
So it's not visualize it in the sight sense,
to conceive of it,
but to share the experience, that sense of the experience. And then they talk. Oh my God. And they talk like, seriously, they don't even talk like they're 21. They talk like they're
teenagers,
or upper teenagers, because they're using big words and they're so proud of their big words, like not intentionally, but they're, I even wrote it where, he says, I've never been drawn to a woman in my life as I have been to you ever since we started this hike. For so long. And I didn't spoil your vacation, she said, with her large childish laugh, too loud for the twilight. It doesn't spoil it. That's good. I thought you meant it distracted you. Distracted? It's like an earthquake. Oh my God, he's so overwrought. Thank you. It's not you, he said harshly. It's me. I wrote in the margin, stop egoizing. Oh my God.
Oh, but he describes, he admits earlier in the chapter that he describes himself as an egoist. He sort of reconciled to that, at least for the time.
So they keep talking. At the bottom of the next page, I wrote, ugh, he's so overwrought. Like I just said it and I had forgotten that I actually wrote that down. And then I add, to call his language purple is an insult to purple.
At this point, even Romeo is like, dude,
just calm himself.
Reel it back a little.
Hamlet would be like, ooh, I got to take notes on this.
Hamlet would be like, no, not far enough. More.
I need the bond, the real one, body and mind, and all the years of life. Nothing else, nothing less. She glanced up at him with defiance. It might have been hatred.
It's suddenly become like a pot boiler, like a romance novel or something.
It's a boy band song.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I'm seeing Shevik as like seriously 19, like technically an adult, but still so much a teenager.
Yeah.
So much a teenager. Oh, and then you aren't like most people, And I'm like, oh, it's the not like other girls line. That's
exactly.
Great. I don't even remember who said that.
You're not like other guys, Shevik.
And then I said, my note on that is, Bosh, we are all alike in our uniqueness. one of my quibbles with The Incredibles was the line, everyone's special, dash. It just means no one's special. No, if everyone's special, then everyone's special. That's what that means. Get over yourself. And so they're talking, and I'd forgotten by this point that, we're all, it seems that way at 25. I forgot they were even younger than that. I'm just like, oh my God. You don't realize. I guess even now, it'll be, and I think I've said this to you before, it'll be interesting hopefully we make it to 70, 80 years old to look back on ourselves at 40 and be like, wow, we were so young.
What dipshits we were. We didn't know anything.
Hey, speak for yourself, okay? Less experienced, but still amazing. Thank you.
That's what I would think now. Perhaps at the age of 80, I might look. Okay, you know what? I would call myself a dipshit. I would never call you a dipshit.
Well, good. Then you'd be correct. So they move in together. I loved this. This. Shevik brought a box of papers, his winter boots, and the orange blanket.
The blanket, yes.
The orange blanket, which hadn't even been his before, but now it's like, and the fact that its orangeness is like immoral, according to
yeah.
I loved that. So I forgot that Tokver becomes a biologist or is a biologist. Yeah. He's just like, they're happy together. His wretched years in this city had all been part of his current great happiness because they had led him up to it and prepared him for it. Everything has been leading up to now in this new domestic bliss, blah, blah, blah. And Tokver saw no such obscure connections of effect, cause, effect. But then she was not a temporal physicist. I'm like, she brought in mobiles.
Yeah, that she made.
Yes, yeah. She's an artist, and artists see cause and effect, especially, when you're creating a mobile, something that moves based on, the wind and, gravitational pull or whatever, obviously she understands cause and effect. You don't have to be a temporal physicist to understand freaking cause and effect. She was 23, a half year younger than Shevik. I circled that and wrote, see, age has more to do with it than we think. Oh my goodness. Badap was wrong. What was Badap wrong? I don't have anything underlined over here on the next page. Topfer's concern with landscapes and living creatures was passionate. Um, There are souls, he thought, whose umbilicus has never been cut. They never got weaned from the universe. They do not understand death as an enemy. They look forward to rotting and turning into hummus. It was strange to see Tokver take a leaf into her hand, or even a rock. She became an extension of it of her. And I wrote, one of my favorite books is Mary Roach's Stiff. You know, the idea that
what happens to
your body if you donate it to the medical or to the scientific community. It can be used in various different ways. And then again, that BDAP is wrong. Change is inevitable. I mean, change is constant. You know, further evidence that BDAP is just wrong. How are you? We're moving quickly. I'm moving quickly. And then they look up ahead at I'm skipping a good bit here.
Yeah,
they look up at Urus.
Right.
And Tyler says, why does it look so beautiful? We know it's a planet, but it's got a better climate and worse people. We know they're all proletarians and they fight wars and make laws, and some of them eat while others starve. And anyhow, we're all getting older and having bad luck and getting rheumatic knees and corns on their toes, just like people here. When we know all that, why does it look so happy? And I'm like, beautiful? It's not the same thing as happy. Like, they're just different things. Like, you can be ugly and be happy.
Yeah. Well, and also it leads into what Shevik says, which is that when you can see the whole thing, it's always beautiful. And he puts actually kind of a positive spin on it, but you could also see it in a more cynical way and say, you know, because you see
this remote view.
Yeah, exactly. In order to see the whole thing, you have to be so far away that all that ugliness, all the problems that are real and exist are invisible. So you can pretend they're not there. You have that luxury of appreciating the beauty without having to deal with the problems.
And there is the sense of, you know, what we consider beauty. Having particulates in the air are what cause color change at sunrise and sunset.
Right.
So, like, sometimes, you know, when areas that are more polluted have more beautiful sunrises and sunsets.
Yeah.
You know, he says, I'll die, you'll die. How could we love each other otherwise? I'm like, that's nonsense. So, like, that's again, two different things,
yeah,
you know?
I think that's, I don't think that's the best way to express that idea. Cause I mean, if we lived forever, we could still love each other, but it's the idea of the finite nature of life, the limited nature of it.
Makes us appreciate it more.
Yeah.
I don't know about that.
It's what makes it precious.
Yeah, but it's what makes it important to appreciate it, because that's all you're going to get.
Yeah.
But I don't think so. I appreciate money. I appreciate having nice things, having, you know, comfortable clothes and, you know, and blankets fresh out of the dryer and good food. And if I had more good food, I mean, there's only so much food you can eat at a time. But, like, if I always had, like, something super tasty for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks, I would not appreciate it less.
As long as you had variety.
You know, not even, I don't know. It depends. If it was always pie, I could go for that.
I believe that. I believe it when you say it.
Yeah, not only that. I mean, there are a number of things. Like, if it was always bibimbap, like, I mean, I like food.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I could appreciate infinity. Yeah, well, some junk food. I mean, there's some foods that I like more than others. I'm not real big on bell peppers. That's, like, the one thing that I don't like. Or not real big on raw onions.
I was just going to say, you don't dig onions either. Yeah.
Oh gosh, I've gotten better, or not better at it necessarily, but I've grown to appreciate them more, especially, you know, sauteed as a flavor for something else.
Yeah.
But
for an aromatic or something.
ceviche has onions in it, and we went out to eat at a Cuban restaurant, and that was one of the items on the menu, and like it had the description of what was in it, and I'm like, and it's got bell peppers. I was like, that's what I want. And Dwayne looked up, he's like, did you see what was in it? And he's like, look at me like, who are you? What has happened? I was like, that's just what I want. And if I don't like it, I don't like it. That's what I'm getting. And I got it and I ate everybody and it was great. And I was like, okay. So, but I mean, our bodies change over time. And as we grow older, like literally our taste buds, we appreciate different things. And that's normal. So, you know, so now I like even more food. My cross to bear.
Oh, loving food. How will I ever?
I love food.
I know.
I love food.
I know.
Cook the onions well, but I put diced onions on my hot dogs, says some random geek. You know, I think more like chili and cheese. What if I was gonna for an ideal hot dog and chili cheese dog? Good stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously it depends on your taste. I mean, I personally like onions, so I mean, I'll eat them raw and eat them, you know, sautéed or whatever. I mean, I'm not a
like in salad.
Hmm?
I know some people who will eat an onion like it's an apple. Just
oh, I can't do that. But yeah, I mean, but like you said, I'll take a slice of red onion in a salad, just one, not a lot. I don't want it to be all onion, but I'll you know,
very strong.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
See, I like broccoli. Not real big on bell peppers. And also that brings us around. We end up talking. Cowboy Bebop comes up a lot.
Yes.
And that is, you know, beef with bell peppers. How can you call this beef with bell peppers when there's no beef? So, yeah, what else do we? I know we're getting towards.
We're almost to the end of the chapter, so they're talking about.
That was all my notes for the chapter. Was your nonsense there? You know.
And they have a conversation right at the end where they're kind of they're looking at Urus and they're talking, and Shevik says, you know, she says, "Oh, you and your damn philosophy," and he says, "It's not philosophy. It's real. It's, you know, I'm holding the moonlight in my hand," and she says, "Don't be such a propertarian." Like, you don't hold the moonlight in your hand. It doesn't belong to you. So, yeah.
So yeah, I remember. I mean, the of course the Queen song, "Who Wants to Live Forever."
To live forever? Yeah.
It's hard, you know, because of course I'm never. Well, I'm rarely. It just takes me. I mean, it's such a heartfelt song, but it's difficult for me to take it seriously because the little, you know, my little left shoulder devil is like, "Who wants to live forever?" I'm like, I do.
I'll try it. Like, I mean, I have
friends who are just like, yes, but you know, you would eventually you would get tired of it. I'm like, yeah, no, not. I mean, living for the hardest thing about living forever is that they keep making more books than I can read. Like I keep getting further behind. That's the problem. And they say, you know, that you know, you will always be. I mean, that's one of the characters on Doctor Who, Jack Harkness, is, you know, oh, he's always losing people. I'm like, that's life. Like literally, best outcome. I love my parents. Best outcome possible. I outlive them. Like that's
right.
That's the positive outcome, is that I have to bury my parents. I mean, that's not great. I mean,
not looking forward to it, but it's the way it is. Yeah.
Is that, you know, like literally that is my worst nightmare, is that my parents attend my funeral. And like, no, yes, if I'm the only one who lives forever, I say goodbye to a lot of people. But I mean, that's kind of the way life works.
Yeah. You say goodbye to people anyway. Yeah.
In a different city, you develop different interests than the friends that you'd had, and you don't want to do the same things, and you kind of fall out of touch. I'm in touch with literally one person from university.
Mm-hmm.
One. We went, and we had internet back I'm not that old. We had internet back in the
Yeah,
day.
absolutely.
And, you know, I didn't stay in touch with people. It happens.
Yeah.
You know?
I would be willing, I think the, I know because we've talked about it a little bit. We both watched and enjoyed The Good Place,
Mhm.
and the the uh the alteration to the afterlife that they come up with in the last, I think it's the last episode of The Good Place, where you can choose, like, your afterlife doesn't have to last forever if you don't want it to.
Mhm.
You know, like you can choose to die, essentially, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah, permanent death.
at a time that you feel is appropriate, and they're never going to force you to. Nobody's going to shove you through the last door, but the final door is there,
There's the
and
door.
when you think it's time for you to go, you can choose to go. And that seems like a much more fair system than what we have now, where where
We got no clue.
well, where we know that our physical lives are limited and are going to end, and we don't have a lot of control over that. And if you believe in most religious versions of an afterlife, it lasts forever,
Mhm.
and you don't seem to have any discussion, any say in that either. It's like if you get to heaven, then you're just there forever, and hopefully you don't get sick of it. But if you do, there's really nothing you can do about it, you know. Whereas in the Good Place afterlife, it's, yeah, it can last forever if you want it to, theoretically. I mean, nobody's gonna like force you to end it, but if you ever get tired of it and you think, all right, I think I'm good, I think my existence can end now, you have the power to do that. So I would totally do that. I'd be like, shit, yeah. You know, let me live for as long as I think I need to live. And if I ever get to a point where I'm like, okay, I've literally done everything, I'm finished, then I can walk through the door.
I guess I would like us to have, no, I wouldn't walk through the door. I'm confident.
Oh, I feel the same way. I don't think I would either.
But it would
I
be
don't think I would either.
it would be nice to have the option to
Yeah,
make the
I agree.
and mostly because, you know, other people are different from me, and I would not want to restrict that choice from them.
Yeah,
Cool with that. So
yeah. So anyway, I actually thought this was one of my favorite chapters of the book so far. Because I like the interaction between Shevik and Bedap, and I also like the interaction between Shevik and Takver.
mhm.
Um, I like the sort of I like the dialogue that's carried on about the society itself, but I also like how it feels natural coming from the characters. It doesn't feel like an author staging a debate to put forward a particular point of view. It feels like it's natural that Shevik would feel the way he feels, and it's natural that Bedap would feel the way he feels, and their arguments about it feel as though they're authentically emerging from character, as opposed to, you know, like author surrogate and, you know, interlocutor
and
and
and and the one who's wrong.
yeah, exactly. It does, and which I think is it's a strength of the book all around so far, is that it doesn't feel didactic, and it doesn't seem naive about the ideas that it's putting across.
Yeah.
You know, it recognizes the complexity and the fact that even though it's arguing, I think it's arguing for a form of society, or at least it's presenting in a relatively a complicated but relatively positive light, a society that I personally don't think would work. But it is, even while making that case, it is acknowledging the complexities and acknowledging that it would not be perfect. There would be challenges, you know, I really appreciate that,
Yeah.
and I just
And
really like Shevik.
I think what Charles is saying, he says that, you know, that he thinks I'm dismissing. I'm not dismissing Badap completely. I'm putting him in his place. Charles says I don't think he's as right as he thinks he is, but there do seem to be cracks in the anarchism of the society that Chevik also sees.
Yeah.
And I think, but at the same time, I think that's, again, like we're saying, it's part of the strength of the book, is it's saying that there's no society that's going to be truly perfect.
Yeah.
Part of it is because, Odonianism was originally conceived not for like the harsh nature. They became very pragmatic because they had to survive
Yeah.
on Mars. And so I think that shaped some of what became tradition. And it creates a very real and reasonable fear of doing something differently, because people might freaking die.
Yeah.
Like if anything's wrong, it's very much, if they start going in the wrong direction, they go too far in the wrong direction, they're all going to die.
Yeah.
So you have to be careful about new stuff. And so, I think they're not, I want to say, the inertia, the social inertia serves a functional purpose. It keeps things, it prevents new stuff, yes, but at the same time, that new stuff isn't necessarily helpful or healthy. And so it can protect them from change that might be hurtful, but at the same time, it prevents them from adapting as quickly as might be beneficial. They don't progress as quickly as they might could. But there's risk in progress,
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Some random geek tells you that it's okay to be wrong.
Yeah. Well, Dana, you have taught me that.
I keep teaching you that.
You keep teaching, not quite on a daily basis, but almost.
Well, just so that you know, it's okay to make mistakes, Steve.
Thank you, Dana.
You're so welcome.
Not that it's ever come up, but it would be okay if you made one every now and then too.
It has come up. I have said those words.
Yes, you have, usually for something trivial, but you have said the magic words.
I can't remember what I said them about most recently.
It was, yeah.
Yeah. Something.
It was a minor matter, but it has happened.
Lisa asks if The Dispossessed is in the same continuity as her other science fiction books, with the big precursors to it. Yes, it is. In fact, they even mentioned the Hainish.
They mentioned them a couple chapters ago. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's part of that universe. I don't know that she's really necessarily big on continuity. About this happens first, this happens next.
Right.
They're interconnected. So.
I knew I liked something about her.
as well as her non-purple description.
Yes.
She's beautifully spare in her description. There's the way that she's like, this thing. And you're like, oh.
She really, yeah, there were a couple of lines in this chapter, and I can't remember one specifically off the top of my head now, so I'm not going to go back and look for it because we're close to the end, but there are a couple of lines in this chapter that we're talking about tonight that are so, it's not, the lines are efficient, but there's still a beauty to them. Her phrasing is absolutely spot on. I
might recommend this to a student of mine. She was debating whether she was going to read Pride and Prejudice or A Farewell to Arms. And I said, oh, it's interesting. She's like, yeah, my mom says that, she just loves Hemingway. And, he was so influential on the language. And she started talking about this. I'm like, yeah. I said, all right. So full disclosure, I appreciate what Hemingway, his influence on the language and how he popularized and made it, the thing to do, to be concise and to be clear. I like that. But dude, he's so full of himself. I don't like his stuff. I don't like his works. I appreciate it, but I don't like it. And I said, just, it's okay if you, I said, now another thing to do would be to look at, to read one of those first and to read the other one as your second challenge book, because we usually do 2 in a semester. And, to look at the difference in language, to really see that. Because I said, opening sentence of, Pride and Prejudice, I'm like, I have that right here. And I read it off to her. I'm like, that is not a Hemingway sentence. I said, it's like 4 lines long with like commas all through it. And I said, just looking at it, from that, so it might be really fun to do that, Farewell to Arms is your first book, and then Pride and Prejudice was another one that she had mentioned being interested in as your second book, and have that in the back of your mind, have a Farewell to Arms sort of recently read, and have that influence how you see Pride and Prejudice, which obviously would have come before.
Yeah. Charlie Hallam points out, says that's a good way to put it. Le Guin is beautifully economical in her writing, which I think is her writing reminds me of, I like the same things about her writing that I like about Buster Keaton as a director and about Hank Williams as a songwriter, because they all have a capacity to be really, really tight and really efficient and not a wasted effort, not a wasted word, not a wasted moment, not a wasted syllable, not a wasted beat. And yet there's a beauty to it. It fits together like a clock, you know what I mean? But it doesn't feel overworked, and it doesn't feel like, sometimes you can find an artist, a writer, a filmmaker, whatever, and their work is extremely technically proficient, but it's also cold, and it doesn't have a lot of passion to it. And Le Guin's writing doesn't have that. It has the economical quality, but it also has a beauty to it that is really wonderful.
Charles Chapman asks, isn't the best way to teach by example? And I know that's part of what I consider the teaching cycle. It's the I do, we do, you do. So, I show you, this is what I'm looking for. I go over it with you. We do it together, and I guide you through the process. And then I step back and I observe you or offer you feedback as you're doing it. So yeah. Okay. Tea tree stuff. Emerlian asks if I've ever had a student pick Ulysses as their challenge book. I don't think they can. I think that one's not on the list.
It's not on the list. No James Joyce for your high school challenge book, for God's sake.
Are you quite finished? Because you interrupted me.
I'm sorry. I apologize. I'm sorry, Dana. I'm sorry.
I forgive you. I give them 6, I think, articles or blog posts and stuff about, 15 books every high school student should read, 20 books every high school student should read, the best 30 books for high school students. And I'm like, so all of them are not just like lists of titles, but they also say, here's why this book is on this list. I say, read as many of these articles as you like, and then list 5 books that you are interested in reading. You will not be required to read all 5 of them this semester, but 5. That way, if your first one, you're like, I'm really excited about this book, and you start reading and you're like, I was wrong. It sucks. You've got 4 more to choose from. Okay. So they were supposed to have them by today. About half of them did. So I said, look, 20 pages by Tuesday. Get the book, 20 pages by Tuesday, go for it. And then I also give them a list of books that might be on those lists that they can't use because they are taught as like class novels in other classes. So like To Kill a Mockingbird, Macbeth, I think is on some of the lists. Romeo and Juliet is on some of the lists, things like that. So if Great Gatsby, Scarlet Letter. So if they're taught in another class, you don't, because then they go to that class and they're like, oh, well, I already read this.
Yeah.
No, that will not be my fault.
And that teacher is like, great.
Thanks a lot, Miss Cole. I'm like, that's not. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We need to wrap up.
Go.
I wish we didn't have to, but I got shit to do.
So we could all follow you over to where?
Well, it's going to be on Cybabe's social media. I know it's going to be on her Facebook page, and I probably on her Twitch channel too.
You could put links to it down in the description. I'm just saying.
I don't have links, Dana.
Did you could ask her.
Oh, God, this is so hard.
Well.
Anyway, yeah, Some Random Geek. Thank you, Dana. You pitch your YouTube channel quickly, and then let's wrap this baby up.
I posted, speaking of Pride and Prejudice, yesterday I posted my most recent section of, and it's called Mr. Darcy is Still a Jerk, because he is. Geez, I mean, he's supposed to be the romantic lead. Oh, I'm like, okay, I'm now 10 chapters in and I still don't like him. So I guess I'm right there with Elizabeth. And then tomorrow, a video coming out about, I think I put it away, about a book called For the Bride.
Oh, that's a good one.
It's so good. It's so good. Although I apologize, you probably won't be able to find it, but I do read part of the book to you at the end. So I'm really enjoying what I'm doing with the channel, and I really appreciate Steve's editing on my videos. And he does such a great job with them. And I don't have to deal with it. It's just
Aw.
weird seeing your own face and hearing your own voice. You know, on the live stream, I don't have to worry about it because, like you say, it's done.
No.
Plus, I'm also not hearing the recording.
Thank goodness I have no such problems with looking at
you're-
your face and hearing your voice.
You're stuck doing it all the time anyway. So.
So subscribe to Dana's YouTube channel if you are not already.
I'm really close to getting 100 subscribers,
Yes.
so that I can actually have a real channel, a real URL,
A real URL, a custom URL.
Awesome. And charity links.
Yes, check, and charity links are linked in the description as well. Charitylinks.page is the URL for that. Some Random Geek is good enough to curate that for us. So check those out. And yeah, that's it, everybody. We'll be back on we'll be back on Wednesday for another Trek Reluctantly. I'll be back on Monday for another conversation stream with Foxy Jezebel. And so have a good weekend, everybody. Dana, I know I'm going to talk to you anyway, but just let's pretend we're not going to see each other over the weekend and say have a good weekend.
Yeah. Everybody have a good weekend.
Everybody have a good weekend.
Stay healthy and you are happy and you get some rest. Good gracious.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. Take care. See you next time.
Bye.